Hello, Allison Whipple of 9 Square Press, and this is part 2 in a series on baseball haiku. As I discussed in the first video, baseball is technically a summer Kigo, but of course it runs all the way from spring to well into autumn, and so we can we don't have to just write about baseball and just say it's only in summer. There are plenty of other ways we can bring that in. So I mentioned that the first documented baseball haiku we have is from Shiki, and he wrote it in 1890. I mentioned that in the last video, but since it's actually a spring poem, I wanted to save it for this video. Apparently he wrote for this year, in the year of 1890, but there's just this one put in baseball haiku. So this is what Shiki wrote. Spring breeze. This grassy field makes me want to play catch. Spring breeze. This grassy field makes me want to play catch. As I mentioned in the last video, certainly in 1890, baseball wasn't a codified haiku for summer. It was not a codified Kigo for summer. So he had to bring spring in there. And this is a lovely, I think, early spring poem where you've got that first warm breeze, things are starting to turn green, everything's starting to come back, and it's all, you just feel that like it's about to be time to start busting out the mitt, playing catch, and then having some fun. Some spring baseball terms. Again, so spring training. This one's interesting. As I mentioned in the last video, it starts in February, which is what those of us who observe the Gregorian calendar consider winter. Now, those of us in the haiku calendar, by the time spring training starts, like if you're following the classical haiku calendar, spring training definitely starts in spring. But in the Gregorian calendar, spring training definitely starts in February. Now it continues into March. Definitely continues into March, but it often starts in February. And honestly, even if it started a little later, like in super early March, we still in the Gregorian calendar consider that winter. Baseball season doesn't start till really right around, like just after the spring equinox. So like Major League Baseball certainly is like the very start of spring. So how do we deal with spring training? I like to think of that as, well, like one of the things I've been doing is to allow for season terms to be sort of either or, depending on what calendar you're in. We can think of spring training. I think of it as parsing out the English. Is it training in spring or is it training for spring? That's what I've really come to think of. Is I don't necessarily think of spring training as we are training in spring, because we play in spring. We start training in the winter to train for spring. We train at the end of winter to prepare for the spring. That folds in really neatly with the Gregorian calendar, which to me feels very out of step with the lived perception of the seasons. But to focus on spring training that way is a way, it actually fits well into that and fits well into the perception of season and time. So it is certainly, whether you're going to consider spring training a spring keyword or a winter keyword or Kigo, it's certainly a harbinger one way or the other. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments if you agree, or if you have your own thoughts. We could also have opening day or home opener, either one of those. In Major League Baseball, I don't play on a league, so I'm just mostly going off of Major League Baseball as a reference point. That tends to be in March, which is early spring in the Gregorian calendar and mid-spring in the traditional haiku calendar. Those are the two big ones for me. Those are the two big baseball Kigo that come to mind for me. We could also use scrimmage or exhibition game. I feel like scrimmage is more of a term used for like hobbyists, for amateurs, and exhibition is more for the pro level. But either way, certainly as part of spring training, baseball players play a lot of exhibition games that don't count for the actual regular season standings. They're preparatory games. They're fun to watch, but they don't actually have weight when it comes to things like who's going to go to the championships, who's going to go to the World Series. And we tend to play a lot of those in the spring. We do have some exhibition matches certainly in summer, such as the All-Star game. That's an exhibition match, but you see them more often in spring, so I would put that there. So I will read you some haiku. Again, these all come from Baseball Haiku, but I didn't necessarily want to be flipping around because I really had to seek out the spring ones. First warm day. Fitting my fingers into the mitt, pounding the pocket. First warm day. Fitting my fingers into the mitt, pounding the pocket. So that was Cor Vanden Heuvel. He also has lingering snow. The game of catch continues into evening. Lingering snow. The game of catch continues into evening. So these don't use the word baseball explicitly, but first warm day. So in the first poem, first warm day is really the season word there. It's the season identifier. But we know what the mitt is. We know what the mitt refers to. I guess if you didn't know anything about baseball, that wouldn't make sense. But as someone who does, if you know about baseball, you know what that mitt is referring to. And so that is certainly, that very much, I think, echoes Shiki's poem that I read at the beginning very nicely. Lingering snow, that one, even though snow is normally winter, the fact that it's lingering, that tells us that it's technically spring. And we also know that it's spring because it's light enough that the game can continue into evening. It can't go as late as like a summer night game, but it can continue, later, like, even to like 6, maybe even 7 o'clock. This one is Arizona Zipper. Hopping over the mound and into the dugout, the first robin. Hopping over the mound and into the dugout, the first robin. I think that is, and again, that relies on other words, other Kigo. So the first robin is generally a spring Kigo. So it's about baseball, but it invokes the spring aspect of baseball. And so, no matter what season we're in, we can bring baseball into our haiku and not worry that we're artificially going to place it in summer. There are plenty of options. So those are my words. If you had other sort of spring associated baseball keywords that I didn't mention, you can drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, like and subscribe if you haven't already. There's going to be at least one more video in this series, maybe 2. All right, I hope you have some good haiku moments over the next week.